Hi guys, Mr. Talbot here for you, kind of continuing our topic 2.4 notes. In this video, we're going to be kind of focusing on some of the civilizations in the Americas. Want to remind you that for this topic, make sure you've done the Mongols section, but then you can either do this video or you can be looking at what's going on with Africa or the Muslim world. You're just going to pick one of the other ones, so Mongols and one of the other colors here. So when we think about the Americas, we often think about kind of the big three civilizations, and that's kind of going to be where we're going to spend our time. I want you to be thinking about, how did these states develop and how did they change over time? What are some of their accomplishments? Maybe how were they set up? Kind of some of the changes they were undergoing. So we look at the Maya, the Mexico, or better known as the Aztec, and then the Inca. So Inca are down kind of in South America, Chile along the Pacific coast, Mexico or Aztec kind of around Mexico City today, and the Maya kind of into Central America and southern Mexico. And each of them has kind of this unique stuff. In what is today the United States, though, we think about, there's the Mesa Verde people in the Southwest, the Chicao, and the Cahokia, and all of these kind of are modifying their environment over time. We're not going to spend too much time on them, but we will briefly hit on them. The Cahokia, one interesting thing about them is that they're probably the largest city, the largest civilization in the Americas for when it's around, but then it's going to kind of be abandoned prior to the development of these other three. So as I move myself here, I've actually been to kind of the most famous Maya feat of architecture, which is Chichen Itza. It's one of the new wonders of the world, and I'm the guy in the bright yellow shirt over here. So kind of the Maya were set up in a similar way to ancient Greece, where they're going to have different city-states, and they would each kind of be run in their own way. But for the most part, it's kind of based on a bit of a theocracy, divine rule, that kind of thing. One unique thing about the Maya that we did not see in ancient Greece is the role of women. Women could even be rulers of the city-states, so very, very advanced in that way. And kind of, they're probably, the Mayas are most famous for their calendar, but also their feats of astronomy, their architecture, as well as kind of developing the most complex writing system in the Americas. To give you a sense of how good they were at architecture and at astronomy, on the spring and fall equinox, if you look at this middle picture up here, down the side you're going to kind of see a shadow being created kind of there. And what's actually at the bottom is a carved snake head. And so this is actually the shadows making the body of the snake. Snake's really important to Maya culture. But just to place the building so precisely with the technology available at the time gives you some idea of how smart they were and how good of astronomers they were. The other thing that should be noted is they're able to build these pyramids, as will the Aztec, without what are known as beasts of burden. So things like without horses or mules or things that can help move these stones. All of this had to be done with manual labor. The probably most famous of the three, I would argue, is probably the Aztec. And the Maya were kind of stayed and were around for a long time. Their civilization kind of ebbed and flowed, but it really stayed pretty consistent. The Aztec kind of grow really, really powerful, really, really fast, but then also fade away really, really quickly, kind of like the Mongols did. And within the Aztec, they're going to basically, there's these different city-states, but it's a very clear who is in charge. The Maya, there wasn't really one capital city or whatever, but the Aztec there were, and it was Tenochtitlan. And once you were kind of ruled by the Aztec, it was pretty harsh. Unlike the Mongols that were very tolerant, and as long as you didn't work against them, they were cool with you. Aztec were very much, you're going to be paying us lots of tribute, and that could be resources, but most famously, it's going to be human beings, which are going to be involved in their human sacrifice. The whole empire is only last about 100 years before the Spanish show up and do it. But what they're able to do during that time, they essentially take Mexico City from a swamp into one of the largest cities in the world at its time. It had everything that we would think of in a modern city, roads, public works projects, large temples, these different floating gardens they would grow their food on, even a zoo. What was there? It's kind of advanced civilization there. And then the Inca are the final of the big three, kind of from Latin America. And so it's an empire again, meaning that it's Not like the Maya where it was kind of different city states. The Inca had, one capital city that kind of ruled over all of these other areas. And you can kind of see in the map in the top right how fast it grew. So the guy who ends up unifying, his name is Pachacuti, which is a fun name, but it actually translates to destroyer. So again, pretty harsh conquest if you stood up to them. But kind of a unique thing about the Inca was they're going to kind of realize, as will the Mongols, and as will some other empires, that like it's just too big to manage as one entity. So they kind of break it into four different parts and give a different governor. So a similar system as we have with states and governors, along with the president. Similar thing we saw with the Inca there. Kind of remarkable when you look at some of the architecture. First off, they're building all of this stuff on the side of a mountain, which is incredible. And they'd be farming on the side of these mountains. And so what they would do is they would make these stones, and essentially they would set them up in a way to where they would collect the heat of the sun during the day, so that at night when it was cold, that the stones would still be letting off heat, so the crops wouldn't die. So just the ability to think through that. And these walls, they built all of this, unlike what we see with brick walls today, where there's kind of the mortar, a little bit of concrete holding them together. All of this is just held together because it's a perfect puzzle that fits together. So all the seams are kind of done. And they're able to manage the biggest empire in the Americas without a formal writing system. What they instead would do is they would kind of keep accounting of all stuff. What these are called quipus. They would kind of tie off different knots and stuff. And they were able to kind of manage this large region at the same time. So we see kind of these big civilizations develop in the Americas, as we're kind of summarizing here. Uh, a lot of success cultivating crops, and those crops are going to be what are picked up in the Columbian Exchange that are going to help boost world population. So things like corn being really, really important. And all of these architecture done, again, without those beasts of burden that we mentioned earlier. And I think a thing to notice is that each of these civilizations were not just stagnant, waiting for the Europeans to come and show them how to. They were really going through these big, big changes. So the Aztec were kind of had just risen to power and were kind of disliked by the people they ruled over, which is what this kind of conquistadors are going to be able to kind of tap into. The Inca had just been unified and just fought a large civil war when with Pachacuti's kids fighting over who's going to rule. So then right as that civil war comes to an end, then the Spanish are going to show up. So the American empire is just like we're going to see in Africa and just like we saw in Eurasia, developing and changing over time right before they all kind of collide. All these great civilizations, unfortunately, that we're going to see are going to get kind of wiped out by disease and by conquest. So we're going to kind of end it for the Americas. So we're going to, this next one, we go into Africa. Remember, you're only doing the Mongols and one of the topics. Thanks, guys.